Every now and then, stories come to us that we know we have to share right away. Stories that we know will stay with you for a long, long time after this video ends. As always, we recommend discretion, and if you are sensitive or easily influenced, you might want to skip this video. We hope you're ready for what's coming. This is Relatos de la Noche. I guess a lot of people say this, but I don't know where to start. This experience still isn't over, and it has been with me for the past 12 years. It has affected all of us, my family and close people who, without wanting or expecting it, have also become part of this story. But to begin, I have to go not only to 2008, I suppose, when the experience started for me, but before that, much earlier. Back to the 1980s, to a small and peaceful town in Guanajuato, home of my grandmother and my mother's family. My grandmother was always very close to the local priests and was always one of those ladies who spent her time at church, helping out, giving what little she had to others. But it wasn't always like that. Before it wasn't so little, because when her children finished school and she was already alone there, she donated everything she had to the poorest people in the town and lived only on my grandfather's pension. On one occasion, when she was teaching catechism to a group of girls, someone came in very alarmed looking for the priest, desperately asking for help. My grandmother, seeing that poor man like that, getting off a little donkey as thirsty and tired as he was, ran to look for the priest, thinking it was some kind of accident and that someone needed the holy oils on the road. She asked the girls to care for them and give them water while she searched for him. She went out to the back of the church and looked toward the hill where the priest would often go out alone to pray. When she walked up to the path, she looked up again. Where it ended, on the horizon, he saw a woman in black, with long white hair down to her waist. Because of the wind, it was blowing in her face. My grandmother couldn't see her face, but she knew it wasn't any woman from the village. And even though she was afraid, a strange fear that this woman caused her, she kept walking up towards her. She was slowly approaching that woman who remained motionless there, despite the strong wind that had suddenly picked up, a wind that seemed to have brought with it black clouds announcing a storm. She heard her name being called and turned toward the church. It was the young priest with the girls from catechism. The grandmother turned around and started walking as best she could with her bad knees going down the path. The girls ran to help her. "Who is that woman?" asked the priest, who kept looking at that figure at the top of the hill. "I don't know, Father," the grandmother replied. That figure looked ghostly. The father gave her a blessing by making the sign of the cross, and that woman turned around and disappeared into the horizon. That poor peasant who had arrived tired had come from far away. He said that when he asked the priest in his village for help, the priest refused him. And he began to go from village to village, looking for the help he needed, which was so urgently required back in his community, but no one was willing to do it. He went into a room with the priest to tell him about his situation in private. After an hour, the priest asked him to step outside so he could make a phone call. When the priest later left his office, he told him that he couldn't help him either, that he was sorry, but it wasn't possible for him. He told him to call the police, but the farmer started to cry. He said there wasn't even a police officer in his community, that there was nothing left, that there was no hope anymore. He went out and looked for his little donkey and started the journey to the next town. From the church entrance, the priest shouted for him to go home, saying no one could help him and they wouldn't allow it. But the young man kept going without paying attention. The grandmother, as best as she could, ran with her bad knees to catch up with him. That poor donkey could barely walk, so it wasn't that hard for her. Young man, what's wrong with you? What do you need that you need so much help? I can't tell you, ma'am. I'm sorry. I have to keep going. I have to get the help. Whatever it is, you can tell me, son. Let me help you. My grandmother had no idea why she said that. She didn't know what was happening to him, but something inside her, in her heart, made her say these words with more certainty than she had ever spoken anything before in her life. For the love of God, son, with Jesus as my witness, I will help you, she told him. The young man then stopped. Maybe if they see you, they'll believe you. Maybe they'll listen to you. Please come to my town with me. My grandmother nodded but refused to ride with him, that poor little donkey that looked ready to collapse. They approached the church where my grandmother told the priest to take care of that poor animal, that she would accompany the farmer to his town, walking if necessary. But the priest lent them his little truck and gave them his blessing so they could go. So they set out on the road to that young man's little village, a settlement with just a handful of houses, nothing more, whose plots stretched out to the hills. The sky remained black, and even though it was only 6 in the evening, it seemed like it was about to get dark at any moment. The grandmother said it felt as if it was going to get dark forever. They arrived at the little village, and the young man asked her to keep going and pointed to a small path. I live over there, ma'am. That's my little house, but the truck can't get all the way up. They left the vehicle when there was no more room, and then he helped my grandmother walk a few hundred meters more until they turned onto a path and the village disappeared from view, down below, far away. And my grandmother was overcome by a feeling of loneliness. It was odd for her, because since my grandfather died, she always felt accompanied by him and by God. But there, she didn't feel him anymore. At the path's end, she saw light in a small wooden house dimly lit by a bare bulb at the door. We're here, ma'am. That's the place. Come on. They reached the small house and found an old lady on the floor when they opened the door. Grandma, said the young man. She's okay. They helped her up together, and the lady could barely ask if he had brought the help. Yes, Grandma, this lady is going to help us. She will see that what we are saying is true, and she will help us convince a priest to come. You'll see. Where's my sister? She has to see her. She got away from me again, son. I couldn't stop her. But you already know where she's going to be. Over there at the cemetery. The young man ran out without saying anything, worried, and my grandmother, as best as she could, hurried after him. They went up a few hundred meters more, up to the cemetery, where before arriving, she heard a woman scream. And immediately he thought it was that girl they were talking about, but then he heard a second scream, and then a third voice. Suddenly, it seemed like there was a group of women up there, filling the echo with synchronized screams that formed a kind of macabre chant. He managed to see the cemetery and the young man running into it. And a few meters ahead, a naked young woman seemed to be digging into a grave like a wild animal. The young man did his best to restrain her, taking her hands. The grandmother wanted to help by walking but couldn't. Something had pinned her to the floor. She couldn't even say a word. For some reason, she couldn't even pray. But she saw how the young man carried the woman and hurried out of that old cemetery. It felt to her like it was hundreds of years old. When he got to the grandmother, the young woman already seemed unconscious. "Come on, ma'am, don't stay here." The screams could still be heard in the background, and the grandmother had to ask, "Who's screaming, boy? Who are those women?" "Leave her alone, ma'am. Come with me, please," he said to her as he turned around to look at the cemetery again. "Walk, mother, walk, please, and for the love of God, don't turn around." The grandmother then walked beside the boy, helping to support the unconscious young woman, and those screams behind them seemed to get closer. It seemed like they were already just a few meters away from them, walking behind, just a few steps away. The grandmother couldn't pray. The words wouldn't come out. She couldn't think of any prayer, and at some point, she finally had enough strength to do it. In a very low voice, but somehow that was enough for those voices to start moving away. They reached the small house where the lady greeted them, and together they placed the young woman on a bed. Then my grandmother watched in terror as the young man and his grandmother tied the young woman to the bed. "What's wrong with her? Who are those women at the cemetery?" "They're witches," said the boy's grandmother. "I've lived here since childhood. They visit a few times a year, but now they're coming every day. Since my girl has been unwell, they want to get her pregnant. They take her away at night so the devil can impregnate her, and my girl keeps getting worse. She barely seems like herself now. It's as if others are speaking through her, but we don't know how to help." The family dog started barking outside, and my grandmother looked out the window. And standing on the path about 40 meters from the house was that woman in black with white hair again, the same one I had seen earlier at the church. "She wants to take her away," said the boy as he went out to shout insults at this woman. The next part of the story gets a bit confusing because we know little about the ritual that followed, and because several uncles have different versions. What we all agree on, in the stories we know, is that the grandmother returned to the village the next morning, claiming that she had seen things that made her certain that the poor girl really needed an exorcism ritual. But nobody paid attention to her. They ignored her just like that poor peasant boy, until the young priest of the church gave it a name and a nearby address. He had to go to Guanajuato and look for Father Lucas there. A few days later, he did it, with the help of one of my aunts who took her. They found that old Italian man who looked like anything but a priest. His house was more like a painting studio, and he explained to them that he had left the church more than 3 decades ago, that he had fled from Europe, where he had spent his whole life traveling through several countries. Now, he lived peacefully in that city, in Guanajuato, painting pictures that no one bought from him. But that didn't matter. He lived peacefully. He was happy. "But destiny always finds us," he told them. My grandmother explained the situation, and the man asked for forgiveness, saying his heart was at its limit. He wouldn't be of much help. He wouldn't last more than a few hours in a ritual like that. In the end, they'd just have to deal with my body as one more problem, he told them. He then told them his story about what he did, that before his retirement, he was one of the last exorcists who participated in more than 15 rituals. That literally, in his own words, he had looked Lucifer in the eyes. He searched in a small wooden box with a key, opened it, and took out a crucifix. This is the most powerful weapon I had in my career, he told them. This crucifix has been used in exorcisms for hundreds of years. At some point, my mentor gave it to me, but I had no one to give it to. As he said this, he handed it to my grandmother. Whatever you do, no matter what happens, never destroy it. Carry it with you because you will need it. But afterwards, you will have the responsibility to take care of it forever. That was the last time they saw Father Lucas, who never got the chance to explain what this powerful crucifix could cause. Then, my grandmother, with that crucifix in hand and together with the young priest from her church without actually performing an exorcism per se, they went to that little house every night until the young woman became herself again. She never wanted to describe what they did. It was a secret she was going to take to the grave. But she did ask my mother that when she died, she should keep that crucifix forever, no matter what happened. That she shouldn't leave it in her little house in Guanajuato when she died, a house she ended up donating to the church so they could build an orphanage. She asked her to take it from there since she was the one who lived the farthest away, that she should be the one to have it. My grandmother was almost 90 years old when she died, on that 16th of July, 2008. We were able to bury her, and a few days later we returned home. My mother had that little wooden box with her in her hands. When we entered the house, all the lights that were on burst. We should have known what was coming. We should have seen the sign of the darkness that was looming over us, of the time of darkness that was approaching. When my brother was almost a baby, he was given a rag Harlequin. At a gathering at our house, one of my mom's caring work friends brought her mother along. The lady was delighted with the baby, and a few days later she sent him that beautiful little doll. It looked more like a decoration than a toy, but she said it was for him. Inside, you could almost feel its porcelain skeleton, and you could move it in a certain way so it would take different positions. When my brother was just over a year old, already walking and asking for specific toys, he requested it for the first time. Until then, it had been on a piece of furniture next to his bed, as if permanently watching over his sleep. But then he insisted on taking it with him everywhere. There was no way he could feel safe if he didn't have that toy with him. He slept with it, ate with it, talked to it. He only left it when he was being bathed, but it had to be there, close by. When we heard the jester's bells, we knew my brother was coming. Those bells ran nonstop all over the house. It even became a running joke that the two of them were always together. At some point, my brother told us his name, and we all started calling him that. A name that up until now we can't mention and that I wouldn't even dare to write. And the thing is, at some point my brother started leaving the Harlequin outside, out there in the yard behind a fig tree. We would pick it up and bring it inside, but he, quietly, almost in secret, would ask us to take it back out again. He told us not to throw it away, but please, not to let it come inside. It took him a while to tell us why. The same amount of time we spent moving that doll from one place to another in the yard, not wanting to throw it away just in case my brother wanted it again someday, or simply to keep it as a memory of those early years when my brother loved it so much. But at some point, when we were far from home, someone happened to ask my little brother why he had stopped liking it. He said it was because it showed him its face. My brother said that the doll used to talk to him, that it had been his friend, that it had taught him words we didn't use, but at some point it asked him if he wanted to really see it, its true face. My brother answered yes, and then it showed him. Behind that Harlequin face, which for me was already scary enough, it showed him a face with red eyes, a bare smile, and blood dripping from its mouth. My brother asked him why he had blood, scared. The doll replied that it had just eaten. My brother asked him what he ate, and he said that then the doll touched his chest. At that moment, we still did what any normal family would have done. We thought it was just the boy's imagination. Of course, we knew there was no way he would ever ask for the doll again. So we put it away in a small wooden room we had in the yard, along with some of the tools my dad left behind and some boxes of things we no longer used. That's where that Harlequin ended up locked away, but not forever. Around that time, since my dad wasn't around, my Uncle Marco was living with us. He helped around the house, but most importantly, he cared for my mom, who was deeply affected during those months. My uncle was always like a rock, so we were surprised when we heard him shout and saw him run out, slamming the back door as he rushed into the yard. When we saw him disappear among the trees, I remember that my mom and I went outside, but as we were going out, my mom, for some reason, told me to go back, to go inside and check that my little brother was okay. That's what I did, and when I entered his room, he was praying on his bed. Something common when he was about to sleep, but strange at that moment in the middle of the night. He kept praying to his guardian angel, the only prayer he knew. The Harlequin is out there, he told me. Again. Again, that phrase, those words. This is another thing I can't explain, but when he said again to me, at that moment I realized he had already told me before, that he had told me that at night the Harlequin called him. He would go and show him his other face, threaten him from the yard, yell at him to let him in. But no. It was as if I had never heard him before. I never answered him, never said anything to him, never told my mom about it. It's as if something had blocked me from really hearing him all that time. When I looked out from his window into the yard, I saw that my mom and my uncle were walking back to come into the house. I left the room, and from the stairs I heard what my uncle was saying, and I went down a few steps so I could see them. My uncle was pale, sweating. He told my mom that he left his room, the only one on the first floor, and that he came to the kitchen to get something to eat. When he was coming back, he noticed something in the yard, something that was moving in the darkness. He could see it through a crack in the curtain, and when he got closer to it, he managed to recognize that silhouette. The Harlequin doll stood there, facing my brother's second-floor window, making faces at him and using its hands to open its mouth, as if to scare him. When my uncle shouted and opened the curtains, the thing turned and ran into the darkness. My uncle also ran outside, grabbing a shovel by one of the plants as he left the house. He heard the bells, and then he paid attention. In the back, in the darkness, he could see it among the plants, hidden, crouching. He struck it hard with the shovel and felt how he hit it, how it went all the way in, how it got stuck, as if it were flesh and not a doll. And he saw among the branches a face with an expression of pain and eyes full of hatred. He said he saw him run toward that old brick wall in the back, but nothing more. He couldn't see where he went. That's when my mom ran out to the yard and yelled at him, begged him to calm down and pulled him inside. She wanted him to tell her everything, to explain what he had seen out there. And when he did, my mom didn't question him. In fact, they both went out to look in that little wooden room to check, and to their bewilderment, that doll had disappeared. All the photos of my brother from back then are cut, all the ones where that doll appeared, which is practically every photo we took of him. And my brother stopped mentioning it, and when my mom got better, my uncle, who was never the same again and smiled less and less, went back to his house. And we thought we would never have to think about that doll again, about that Harlequin. But we were wrong. Days after my grandmother died, we returned home. My mother had that box with the crucifix inside in her hands. When we came in, all the lights that were on exploded. And we should have guessed what would happen next. We should have seen the sign of the darkness that was looming over us. That was approaching. My brother, who was already 18 at the time, changed the light bulbs, while I helped my mom find a space in her closet to put that box away and store it. Store it as well as Grandma used to. Maybe you won't believe me because of this experience with the Harlequin I just told you about. But until then, my family didn't worry about things like the paranormal. That ended up being a story we didn't revisit, maybe just a child's fantasies, or the imagination of an uncle who, half asleep, thought he saw something else in the shadows. But it's not something that left a mark on us. Besides, it had been a long time since we had seen my uncle, who hadn't visited the house since then, and only greeted us from afar at family gatherings. That's why what was about to happen hit us so much harder. That first night when I was woken up in the early morning by the sound of my mother vomiting in her room right next to mine. I got worried and got up. I went to her room to see if she was okay. When I knocked on the door, that sound stopped, and my mother asked from inside if it was me knocking. I said yes, and she told me to come in. When I went in, I noticed that my mom was peeking out from the bed, from under the blankets, and I was surprised. I thought she was really sick and had thrown up in bed, so I quickly went over and asked her, "What's wrong?" "I'm very scared," she answered me. "Scared? Did I hear you throwing up, Mom? Are you okay?" "I'm not throwing up." There, I heard it again. The sound was coming from inside that wardrobe where we had kept the crucifix. We didn't even open those doors. We left my room, and after praying for an hour, we slept together there, trembling. We called my Aunt Martina the next morning. She had returned to the village a few years earlier to take care of Grandma. Although, as I told you, Grandma's house no longer belongs to the family, my aunt built one very close by, just around the corner, and somehow the people in the village saw it as an extension of my grandma. The ladies from the church would now stop by her place. People would ask her for advice when they ran into her on the street at the market. My aunt understood, even before my grandma passed away, how important her presence was to those people, and she decided to help however she could. At that moment, alone and with her grown children, she was in a similar position to when Grandma decided to dedicate her life to God and the people of the town. But we called her that morning and she didn't answer. She was at church. We insisted and were finally able to reach her at night when she told us she was surprised we hadn't called her earlier, just as she was leaving the town, begging to return the crucifix. I just know that whenever someone in town needed my mom's help, she would visit their homes with only that crucifix for company. And when she came back, she would put it away very carefully, behind the little altar of St. Michael, my aunt used to say. It has, like a lot of energy. When she got sick and we took her to the hospital, I brought the crucifix home. And I don't know if you'll believe me, but that day, my aunt paused for a while, as if gathering strength for what came next. That day, around mid-afternoon, I went out to water my plants, taking advantage of the fact that I had come home to rest, and out of the corner of my eye, I saw someone moving inside the house through the window. I was really scared, but I peeked in to see who it was, to see if it was a thief or someone I knew, and they went on thinking I was inside. But it was an old man without a shirt and with very sunburned skin, as if he had been out in the sun for days. He was there, standing in the middle of the living room with his back to me, and I moved to the next window to see his face. I shouldn't have done it. He wasn't a person. He wasn't a living person, you know. His face was blurry, like smoke was coming out of it. It looked like it was burned, and I swear to you it was blurry, like I couldn't focus on it, but the rest of his body looked fine. And I know it was caused by that crucifix, because when I took it to my mom's house, I didn't see or feel anything strange here at home again. But let me find out more. Let me talk to the priest. In the meantime, keep it safe, please. And if you can, have some holy water handy. My aunt didn't call us until the following weekend, although she would text us to ask if we were still okay. In those messages, we briefly told her what we were experiencing. At first during the nights and then also during the day, in the house, you could hear someone coughing as if they were sick. You could hear someone vomiting, but now it wasn't just coming from the closet, it was coming from every corner of the house, as if from the walls, as if it came from inside. My mom and I were terrified, but my brother refused to believe it and made fun of how cautious we were. He didn't believe in anything at all, and it's better that way. Otherwise, he would have had to deal with the consequences of that companion he had when he was just a baby for his whole life. My mom and I slept in the same room. My brother stayed in his. Now he slept downstairs for more privacy in the room where my uncle used to stay years before, as you might remember. Usually if I got up at night, my mother would get up with me and vice versa. But one of those nights, my mom woke up so thirsty but also so sleepy that she completely forgot about the situation we were living through. She got up and went to the kitchen as if nothing was wrong. She heard some jingling bells inside my brother's room, which had the door slightly open. She walked slowly over there. She pushed it very slowly, very carefully. The light was off, the bed was made. My brother wasn't there, and my mom assumed he had gone upstairs to stay in my room because deep down, he didn't want to be alone down there. She was about to shut the door and head upstairs when a jingle bell was heard inside. From behind the bed, as if it were hiding, the points of a Harlequin's hat were sticking out. A hat that my mom recognized immediately. But with one difference. It looked much bigger. As if it were life-sized, as if there wasn't a doll behind the bed, but a real person. She closed the door and ran upstairs. She quickly asked my brother if he was in my room and gathered all of us together. She took out the crucifix and we all slept together, while my mom held it tightly in her hands. She didn't even need to tell my brother what she saw. He could feel it. He had come back. He had come back for him. Something had brought him back. My aunt's call didn't reassure us. That young father who had assisted Grandma in the ritual was no longer a young man. He was an experienced priest who kept insisting to my aunt not to worry about that crucifix, that he couldn't tell her more, that what Grandma had already told us was enough, and he was reluctant until after he said we should leave it there at Grandma's house in its place, and my aunt told him no, that now it was in the possession of one of her sisters. His expression changed. He requested its immediate return. It was an extremely powerful artifact, but at the same time it had a terrifying destructive capability. And he had to tell him the story. The story of a crucifix hundreds of years old, used in exorcisms all over the world, passed down through the hands of exorcists for generations, until it ended up in the hands of the grandmother, almost by chance, because she was the only one willing to risk her life to save a soul. But the grandmother couldn't use it, and that young father with her didn't know either. And this crucifix, with a certain power of its own, obtained through the faith of so many priests, from the triumphs over so many dark beings, became a threat. And the place where it was kept was a place where a tremendous reaction from any nearby low astral entity was expected. The priest also said that Father Lucas wrote to him and told him a little about it. He told him that the beings sent by Lucifer are always around us, very close, provoking us. And sometimes they sleep. They sleep for years or even centuries, waiting to have a victim nearby. This crucifix was able to awaken, to provoke a reaction out of fear in any demonic being it encountered or any evil spirit. Nothing that reacts to this artifact is good, and it will especially provoke those entities that have never been human. Tell them to give it back, he told my aunt to tell us. Return it before something bad happens. But he couldn't receive it. And my mother didn't want to take it to my aunt and think that she would have to suffer through it then. So she did something. Something that we now know was a serious mistake. She drove to a wooded area outside the city. She stopped by the side of the road, got out, and walked among the trees, always feeling the presence of someone behind her. When she reached a tree that had been struck by lightning, She felt that this was the place, that she was lost enough to do it. And then she buried the crucifix. The worst was yet to come. No, in my family, we've never been believers in the paranormal. Well, to be more specific, we did believe, but we were never afraid of the possibility of encountering something like that. I guess most of us find ourselves in that spectrum at some point, or at least most of us who listen to channels like this one. We know there's something out there that can't be explained scientifically, but we don't live in fear of the dark. But I, however, always had a certain repulsion towards witches, towards the satanic. I guess it's because at some point in my childhood I heard my grandmother's story. How back in the village she had to rescue a poor young woman from the clutches of the devil and the witches that came down from the hill. After her family sought help and the church couldn't offer it. Yes, that was probably it. That's why, that evening, just before dark, when I was alone at home, my stomach turned when I heard those knocks on the gate. That's why, when I looked out, my legs gave out and I fell. When I saw at the front door a woman dressed in black with very white hair standing in front of our house calling us. I don't know how absurd this might sound, but in my house, we had been experiencing paranormal manifestations for weeks, almost at any time of day. But for some reason, this woman on the street terrified me like nothing ever had before. It's like I remembered her. Maybe someone has had an experience like this. Meeting someone through a story, through tales, forming such a detailed image in your imagination that eventually it matches perfectly with someone you run into in real life. And I didn't believe this was a coincidence or just some poor woman who looked similar. It was her, I had no doubt. I could feel it. The woman at the door was that witch from Grandma's stories. As best as I could, I got up and barely peeked through the window. I saw her there, with one hand on the gate, snooping around as if trying to look inside, as if trying to guess who was in the house. She tried to open the door, but it was locked with a padlock for some strange reason, because we always leave it open. But I thanked heaven that this time it wasn't. She kept walking down the sidewalk, and when I lost sight of her, I ran to the phone to call my mother, to tell her to hurry, to come home quickly, that there was a strange woman outside. The first cordless phone I found was dead, and I had to run for the other one by the stairs. I couldn't get a dial tone, just static on the other end. I glanced out the window facing the backyard as that woman walked by very slowly. She was already inside the yard. I turned my gaze toward the back door to discover that it wasn't locked. And I ran toward it, and I managed to stop it just as someone was opening it from the outside. They managed to open it about 20 centimeters, but I threw myself against it with all my weight, with all the strength I could muster so that this thing wouldn't get in. That wasn't a ghost. Definitely not. It was a person. I could smell it, a strange scent of earth and herbs, and I could hear its breathing. I know that when I tell it, it won't feel the same. But out of everything that happened in this experience, that moment, feeling that woman on the other side of the door, just a few inches away, is the most terrifying thing I ever experienced. Because I lost control. Because the next thing that happened was that I said, "We don't have it here." And I don't know why I said that, but when those words came out of my mouth, I knew what I was referring to. We don't have it here. My mom buried it outside the city in the woods. I kept talking. I even told her details about the place, details I didn't know, or at least not consciously, because later I found out my mom talked about them on the phone while I was sleeping next to her. I'm not sure if my brain reacted with stored information as a defense mechanism, or if something or someone else did. Searched inside me. If I were forced to say it. The pressure on the door stopped, so I closed it. I was in shock, motionless. I kept holding the door for about 20 more minutes, even though there was no one on the other side anymore, until I heard the gate again. This time, it was my brother unlocking the padlock. He had finally come back. By then, he was already looking for any excuse not to be at home. His room was impossible to live in. Something strange was happening to us, and whenever we walked by, we heard someone inside. Suddenly, the door would open without us noticing, and we could catch a glimpse of those bells hidden behind the bed. But the three of us would get together, and we would all go in and turn on the light, and we would realize there was nothing there. Until we locked the door, we all placed a piece of furniture in front of it, and my brother, still unwilling to sleep in my mother's room, stayed in my old room. I would leave the door open in my mom's room and the hallway light on. Sleeping like that was our reality. But everything that had started when that relic came into the house got worse after that visit, after that woman came to the house. And yes, when we brought the crucifix, something seemed to shake, as if the house suddenly trembled, as if those things that scared us back then had always been there, asleep. And they had suddenly awakened in the face of that threat. But contrary to what my mother thought, by taking it far away, by trying to make sure it wouldn't hurt us or anyone else, she had left us alone, defenseless, helpless against what had awakened, against everything that kept coming, as if following the trail left behind by that artifact. One night I clearly felt how someone, a small little hand, touched my uncovered foot. I remember that, half asleep, I got really scared because I thought of that damned doll, and I quickly pulled my foot back and sat up with a start. And then we saw, and I say we saw because my mom had woken up, how a little boy calmly walked out of the room. But it was very clear, not like a ghost, not like something out of a movie. It was a boy, about 4 years old, who walked out of the room into the hallway. I felt my mom squeeze my hand, and before we could say it was a dream, that we had just imagined it, we heard that little voice outside like singing as it walked away. My brother came out of his room and asked who was inside, and my mom started crying and told him that she already knew it was no one. And the three of us went out, my brother especially angry, shouting for them to leave us alone, to go away, and we went downstairs and turned on all the lights. We used the holy water we had left, which was already very little. Usually when we sprinkled it around the house, things would calm down and we could sleep. But that time, we felt almost as if we had been provoked to do it. And when my brother threw the last drops, it looked at us. He knew he had made a mistake. Something happened to him. Something broke in my brother at that moment, and my mom went upstairs with him to his room. He was going into some kind of crisis, and for him, it had been very hard to suddenly relive a trauma he had forgotten about a long time ago. He was afraid again, like a child, not a 6 foot, 180 pound young man. His blood pressure went up, and while my mom tried to calm him down, I put some water to boil to make him an herbal tea that had been sent to us. Something was heard inside my brother's room, behind me, right there next to the stairs, as if someone was moving stealthily, trying not to let me notice. Even though the door was closed and there was that piece of furniture in front of it, I was really scared. I ran past the door toward the stairs as soon as I made the tea, and I don't know why, but I really knew, that if we opened the door again this time, there really would be something inside. I got to the room with my mom and my brother looked bad. My mother told me to look out the window. I'm not asking you to believe what I'm about to say or anything else. I'm sharing this especially for those very few people, 1 in 100, 1 in 1,000 maybe, who have had a paranormal experience, who know that anything is possible. I know some people will hear this and make fun of it. But out there, on the sidewalk across the street, there were 3 figures, 3 women. And I'm completely sure that one of them was that white-haired woman, even though I couldn't really see her because it was very dark. But I could see, so to speak, I could see that they were saying something, that they were moving their hands, and then I heard their voices inside the house, inside the room, among us. This is what I think they said, and I say this because it wasn't the last time I heard it, because I even dreamed about it afterward. And I would wake up trying to write down the words to make sense of it. It's Latin, and I made the mistake of saying it out loud again. I'm going to share it with you. If you believe in this, even in the slightest, or if you're susceptible, please don't read it out loud. If you're listening to this, please skip ahead a few seconds. If you're skeptical, you won't have any problem listening to the following. In tenebris non invenite interpeter manducare, and stay with us forever. In darkness you will eat. Father enters. The women walked down the sidewalk toward the end of the street, and I lost sight of them. Downstairs, I heard that heavy piece of furniture being moved in front of the room's door next to the stairs. We knew we couldn't stay. We helped my brother and we went downstairs. The bedroom door at the bottom of the stairs was open, and we walked right past it without looking. I looked for my mom's car keys in the living room, somewhere, while she could barely hold my brother. When I shouted that I found them, my mom whispered something to me. Don't look back. Don't look back. I walked up to her slowly. I felt something on my back, something like a gaze piercing into me. We went out slowly. To this day, my mom has never told me what she saw, and I don't remember how we got there or what we said, but I woke up the next morning at my aunt and uncle's house. I was in the living room, my brother sound asleep next to me. My mom was on the phone with my aunt from the village, and she told her she would try to help us, but she couldn't promise anything. That's what my mom said, but I didn't really know what she meant. Half an hour later, my aunt called. We were having breakfast, still shaking, weak, as if we had just gone through a fire or an accident or something like that. Give me the address clearly, my aunt said. The priest is on his way there. For the love of God, I hope you know where that thing you buried is. What would you do if you found out that there was an artifact in your house that had been used in hundreds of exorcisms around the world? An artifact that became a catalyst for negative energies, for everything bad, and that, while it can be a powerful weapon, also represents a lot of danger. Imagine having a grenade in a house full of children. Yes, it could be a protection in an emergency during war, but in another context, it only represents a latent danger to everyone around it. That's how the priest would explain it to us later. I couldn't keep track of all the different things we saw during those days. We had to wait 2 more days for the priest, who knew Grandma, to arrive in the city, and it was just in time because things at home were getting worse and worse. My brother's girlfriend went to visit her a day earlier. When she called out from outside for her to come out, my brother looked out the window and greeted her. When she arrived, the girl asked about me, and my brother said I wasn't there because I had gone with my godmother. But his girlfriend said she had just seen me. When he looked out the window, he was carrying me on his back as I laughed and moved my head playfully. My brother had been very reluctant to talk about what was happening to us, out of fear of what people would think of him. But at that moment, he had to explain, and well, the girl didn't take it very well. No one ever likes it when someone laughs at what you're going through, at something serious, right? And here I want to insist again on how hard it is to share this kind of experience. Because even people who believe they've seen things have a limit they don't expect to cross, a limit to what they're willing to believe. We tried to get out of the house those days, to hold on a little longer while we waited for the priest to arrive and guide us. And the thing is, at that time, we were still naive enough to think that by getting away, we would be safe. My brother was going to stay with his best friend who lived near the house, but that afternoon he was killing time at his girlfriend's house, almost on the other side of the city. He felt better the more distance he put between himself and that sound of jingling bells. He saw me leave early for my godmother's house, but he didn't know when I'd return. It was around 8 at night when something suddenly worried him, something he felt in his chest. And the first thing he did was borrow the phone to call home, to make sure everything was okay. As soon as the phone rang, it was answered. He says he was able to hear my mother and me talking in the background, arguing. He says we said horrible things while he was yelling at us to pay attention to him, but we seemed not to hear him. He says my mom was kicking me out of the house, that she was saying things my brother didn't dare repeat. There was a small laugh on the phone like someone was mocking us, and then the call ended. My brother was already imagining things. He had just heard the jingle bells behind him in his girlfriend's little brother's room. He was going crazy, and it was better for him to leave before everyone noticed. He called his friend, whom he was staying with, to say he was on his way. When he left his girlfriend's house, where they had always treated him well, he never imagined what he was leaving behind, and that he would never set foot there again. I was with my godmother. My mom sent me to her because she's probably the person with the most faith we know. Extremely religious and a family friend for decades. If I were safe anywhere, it would be with her. We told her everything that had happened. We trusted her. But when I arrived, I realized she only knew the general details, so I made sure to fill her in on everything. It was the first time I truly told what was happening, without fear of whether they would believe me or not. I just said it. I needed to say it, for someone else to know, and to finally see that reaction in their eyes. I don't want anything to come with us, Godmother. I don't want anything to affect you. Maybe it's not good for me to stay. I told her, but my godmother just smiled. If God is with me, who can oppose me? But as soon as she said it, her smile faded. I don't know why. I don't know what happened to her. It was as if something had broken, as if something inside her had fallen apart. And for a moment, it made me remember what Grandma used to say about that first time she felt evil right in front of her, close to her. About that afternoon, as she approached the cemetery, when she stopped feeling God by her side. When we were about to go to bed, when everything was turned off and I started to feel the same fear I always felt whenever night came, and it was time to sleep, to be in the dark, my godmother peeked through the door, her hair already down, wearing her nightgown. She gestured for me to come to her, to leave the room. I stepped outside, but everything was already off. I didn't see her. I didn't see where she had gone, but when I turned around, I saw how she went into a room. Into an empty room that wasn't where she usually slept. I walked down the dark hallway slowly. I didn't know where to turn on the damn light, and the darkness was getting harder and harder to bear. But I walked. I walked looking for my godmother. Something made me turn around, a sound behind me in my godmother's room, but I ignored it and kept walking to reach the room where I saw her go in. The door was open and a dim light was coming from inside. When I got closer, I realized she was lighting candles. She motioned for me to come in. Godmother, is everything okay? No. There's someone in my room. My mom was with one of her sisters when she got the call from my aunt. She was letting her know that the father had left earlier, that he would arrive in a while in the early morning, and that she should do her the favor of receiving him. He's going to your house, she said. She didn't want them to spend more time alone there. The plan to separate us that night and get us away from the house was ruined. Still, my mom appreciated the priest's willingness and intentions. Who else would rush to a place filled with low-vibration beings? But that was his calling, wasn't it? To fight against evil in the world? My mom and my aunt went quickly to the house, but my aunt just dropped her off and left. She wasn't usually scared, but things weren't exactly safe enough to act brave anymore. Before she went inside, someone greeted my mom. It was the neighbor with her little dog. I'm not sure how old that poor dog is, but he's still alive, though he can't go for walks now. I was about to call you, she said to her. I knew you weren't at home because your kids have had the television blaring since the afternoon. My mom didn't want to tell her that no one was home. She accepted the comment, the neighbor's complaint, who kept telling her how she shouldn't let us watch horror movies, that all that brought bad energy. And well, at least my mom wanted the neighbors not to see us as the weird ones, not to realize what was happening, not to cross the street when passing in front of our house. That the neighbor would keep coming over to chat when all this was over, because we still believed it would end. She called my brother from the garden, hoping he would answer so he would come home and she wouldn't be so alone, but the line was busy. She kept walking around the garden, not daring to go inside. She left her purse and went out to the street discreetly to see if the neighbor would come back so she could chat with her. Anything was better than being inside, but no one passed by. The street was already deserted. She didn't want to call me. She knew my godmother always went to bed early, so she assumed I would already be asleep by then. But that wasn't the case. I was having a hard time. My godmother and I locked ourselves in and prayed for a while. I already had all the candles in the room lit. "Nina, who's over there? Should we call someone?" "Don't worry, sweetie. Let's try to get some sleep," she told me with a nervous smile. Her little hands wouldn't stop trembling. My godmother, chubby and short, had the kindest appearance in the world, so it hurt me even more to see her so terrified. Her little glasses would fog up, and I didn't know why. We laid down on some small couches in that room, and I couldn't stop hearing her sobbing. It sounded like she was crying, but very quietly so I wouldn't hear her. She cried from fear. More than an hour went by. It was almost midnight when I was finally able to start closing my eyes from exhaustion, even though it's very hard to sleep when you're that scared. But as soon as I closed my eyes, just for a moment, just a few seconds as far as I could tell, I heard my godmother start praying out loud. And a horrible smell hit me. A disgusting stench that I later learned was sulfur. I turned to my godmother, who was squeezing her eyes shut, like she didn't want to see anything. I could see her clearly because the candlelight was enough to half light the room. And I heard something at the door, something that made me stop. I managed to see that something moved, that something hid, and then I saw the doorknob. It was red hot. I got up quickly and went to my godmother to ask her how she was and what was wrong. And after a few minutes in which I was able to calm her down, she told me that she kept praying quietly when she saw that I was falling asleep. That calmed her down a bit, but she kept praying, and then she smelled that scent. And she heard the door open. It just opened. There was nothing to see, no one. Until something peeked through the door from the top part, but bending down. I mean, it was something much, much taller than the door. My godmother says it was a figure with horns, that it had goat horns and a face like that animal. But there were two horrible details. The eyes were human, and the mouth and the teeth were too. And it would show them and move its mouth as if it were chewing something, but with its teeth bared. That's when he closed his eyes and started to pray. And what finally woke me up was that stench. There were noises outside. Something was in the house walking around and moving things like it was nothing. And in the end, I managed to convince my godmother that we had to leave, that we couldn't stay there. "No, it's my house, she kept repeating, even when I helped her put on a jacket to go out into the cold that had broken out in the city. We exited through the back door and circled the house, never glancing at the living room. Inside, we could still hear noises as if someone was rummaging through things. When my brother arrived with his friend, he wouldn't tell him about it. There was so much trust between them that he didn't even have to explain anything. Asking if he could stay there that night was just something normal, but his friend Fur immediately noticed that something was going on. "Do you believe in ghosts?" my brother asked him, realizing that he had never talked about the subject with him before. "There are two here, according to my mom. I haven't seen anything myself. She says they're the ones who built the house." Farrah kept talking, and my brother started getting nervous, wondering if whatever was causing that damned crucifix to act up had latched onto him. If now we were carrying it with us everywhere. He didn't want to hear the story about the apparitions in that house, but Fur kept telling it amused and unaware of its effect on my brother. He started to lose his breath. He had a panic attack like the one he'd had a few days before, when he realized that damned Harlequin had come back home. He sat down and his friend noticed, trying to calm him. He called for his mom and went to get water, while my brother felt Fair's mom put her hands on his shoulders to soothe him. Finally, Fernando came back with water, and behind him, his mom came in, just woken up. And my brother took a moment to realize that there was no one else in the room, that no one had put their hands on his shoulders. "I'm going home. I have to go home," he said. And Fernando, hearing him, took his car keys. "Yes, let's go to your house," he replied. I found my mom smoking in the garden when I arrived with my godmother, and a little while later my brother and Fur showed up. His friend just kept looking at us with a scared expression. It was obvious, from the look on all our faces, especially my godmother's, that something very strange was going on. Let's stay. Since we were all together, we got the courage to go inside. My godmother was convinced that God had put her there to help us get through this experience, to give us the faith that we were losing more and more. My brother tried to convince Fur to leave, to tell him that we were going to be fine, but Fernando ignored him while he called his house to say he wouldn't be coming home, that he'd be out all night. When we came in, the first thing we did was put the furniture back in front of the bedroom door next to the stairs. We made coffee. Upstairs, it sounded like a family lived there, as if it were the middle of the day. And we all sat around the table to have coffee in silence. My brother found some bread. It was probably a few days old, but it was enough to go with it. I could swear that in the distance outside the house I heard those words in Latin again at that moment. As if those women were nearby, as if they kept calling for something, as if they wanted to punish us. And despite everything we had seen, even though I already knew that the supernatural exists, that it was among us at all times, that it was there in the house, despite that, those women terrified me more than anything. Above all, the one with white hair, the one who had been just a few inches from me, trying to get into the house. We heard a car on the street, and almost reflexively, we all got up from the table. It was a taxi. A priest got out of it. He had arrived. That priest had finally arrived, and he did so at the most important moment, at a time when we began to lose our minds, to feel in some way increasingly overwhelmed by that pressure in our chests, which seemed to start eating us up little by little from the inside. When he came in, when we welcomed him, we felt something very strange, as if his aura, his energy, was a breath of fresh air in the hell we were living at home, as if he brought pure good energy with him. That's what I felt. But a while later, in the kitchen, my brother asked me, "Did you feel it too?" I asked him what he meant. "I felt it very clearly," he said. "Grandma's coming with Dad." Dad talked with us for a moment with everyone who was there, including my godmother and my brother's friend, and then we gathered in the living room to decide what we were going to do. "Forgive me, but whatever we're going to do, we have to do it tonight. I'm sure it's not that I'm keeping you up. If this is what I think it is, I doubt any of you were going to sleep tonight anyway." We all nodded. We all knew he was right. We sat on the living room couches except for Fur, who couldn't fit and leaned against the bar separating the living room from the kitchen. I noticed that he kept looking back, And that's because from where he was, he could see the window that looked out onto the backyard. My brother noticed it too and asked him if everything was okay. "Was someone coming with you, Father?" asked Fair. "No, son, why?" "There's a lady peeking in here outside." Right at that moment when he said it, we heard a lot of footsteps outside, a lot, as if a dozen people had suddenly moved, like when you throw a stone at a tree and a flock of birds flies out. We hurried to close up. I went to the back door to make sure it was locked, but the father went to the front door, and instead of closing it and locking it, he opened it and ran out, trying to find out, to discover who or what was causing all that commotion. But nothing could be seen. We all caught up with him outside, and in the distance, far away, we heard some laughter like that of women. "We need to go look for that crucifix now, but we need someone to stay here. It's no coincidence they're lurking." "Who, Father? What's going on?" my mom asked him. But Father was reluctant to share more with us, as if he didn't want to give us too much information. But after a few minutes, I think he understood that since we weren't people of faith like those he was used to dealing with, we were going to need more information about it, or we wouldn't pay attention to him. And that's when he told us that this situation, that those women surrounding a house peeking in, wanting to get inside, reminded him a lot of what that young man from the neighboring town told him, the one he helped together with Grandma. That's how it all started back at his house, and then something got into his sister. I'm not saying the same thing is going to happen here, but there are things around here that even I can't understand, and I don't want to risk you. Do you agree?" He told us, and we all nodded again. My mom and he got ready to leave. My brother and Fur insisted that they let them go with them, but the father replied that he needed them to be strong, to stay here with us and to pray, even if they didn't believe, to pray with all their strength. The eyes of my poor godmother looked more and more lost with fear, but I knew she didn't regret helping us. I knew she'd do everything to keep us safe as long as possible. And the priest saw her, noticed she wasn't well, and made a comment to my mom in private, who then asked her to go with them. Half an hour later, they were finally heading out to look for that device. Meanwhile, Fur, my brother, and I were getting ready to stay up all night. After they left, someone knocked on the door. We all went out together to see who it was. It was the neighbor, the one who had greeted my mom a little while earlier. She was worried. From her house, she had noticed a lot of movement. "Is everyone okay? Did something happen?" "I was just coming to ask your mom, but I saw her drive by and she looked upset." "Everything is fine, don't worry," I told her. While we were talking to her, the neighbor kept turning around behind us, toward the house, the second floor or the roof. I'm not really sure. But she told us to wait a moment, not to go inside. She returned with her dog, the one I mentioned is still alive, calling him Old Man. "Can he stay with you?" she asked us. "I don't know what you think, but you don't need to leave the dog with us," my brother told her. The dog, as soon as he came in, sat down in front of the stairs looking up. "Well, we've got it covered," said Fair. "Nothing is coming down from the second floor." As soon as he said that, a door opened up there as if the wind had done it, but the little dog took several steps back. He was still alert, watching, but something had definitely made him nervous. Meanwhile, my mom, godmother, and the priest quietly left the empty city and got on the highway. My mother slowed down to try to find the place where she had stopped that time. "So, Father," my godmother said to him, "let's go look for that grenade like you said so you can have it back in your house." "No, ma'am. We're going to look for that crucifix that's as dangerous as a grenade. Because maybe that's the only thing that can help us." My mom stopped for a bit at a place where there were several restaurants, like little food stands by the side of the road. At that hour, they already looked eerie, swallowed by the darkness of the area. The trees behind them seemed to slowly consume them. "Yes, it should be around here, just a little further ahead. It must be there." They moved a little further, and finally she recognized a place with difficulty, since that area changes a lot at night, especially on a night as dark as that one. The father told my godmother to stay to wait for them. "Do you know how to drive?" he asked her. "Yes," my godmother replied. "Okay, then get behind the wheel, be ready to leave as soon as we're back with what we're going to get, and don't open the door for anyone, even if they come asking for help. Is that clear?" Oh, Father, at this hour, in the middle of the woods, who would come to talk to me? The father just looked at her, and his eyes said it all. My godmother locked all the bolts, and my mom moved forward with her lamp. The father walked behind her. They entered the forest. In the house, the dog stayed like a statue, fixed in front of the stairs. We made some strong coffee. They were knocking from inside that bedroom, the one in front of the stairs, the one with a piece of furniture blocking the door, and the one no one had entered for a long time. Fur laughed nervously, insisting someone must be inside, that someone had sneaked in. He moved as if to check the furniture, or so he claimed, but we both stopped him. "There's no one there, I swear. There's no one," my brother told him. "Leave the furniture alone, please." Someone turned the doorknob and opened the door. The only thing stopping her was the furniture, and when Fernando saw this, he pushed it to stop her and asked us to help him. Yes, in a second she had changed her mind. It was obvious that there was something inside, something that under no circumstances could we allow to get out. The dog ran behind us and jumped up the stairs to the second floor, where he was barking very aggressively at something. There was something up there too. My mom and the priest were moving through the forest. It was absolutely dark. They couldn't see anything beyond what they could light up with their flashlights. They felt like they'd trip with each step. Wait, Father said to my mom. "Turn off your lamp." They both turned off their lights and kept quiet. In the distance, they heard footsteps. The father whispered to him to keep absolutely quiet, not to breathe. And then my mom's eyes were able to adjust to that darkness. She says that just a few meters away, only a few meters, she could see a woman with long white hair walking by, going in the same direction as they were. They waited a minute after she left to whisper and decide what to do. "She's here for the same reason," her father told her. "You must already know where it is." "No, Father. We're almost there. We have to hurry. It's under." "No," he interrupted her. "Don't say where it is. Just point it out to me when we get there." They continued forward. The father switched on his lamp but shielded it with his hand, wanting to show as little light as possible to avoid being seen or revealing their direction. A gunshot was heard in the distance, deep in the forest. At home, the three of us dared to go upstairs to look for the poor dog. He had stopped barking. But we saw him staring at my mom's room, which had the door open, and a dim light seemed to be coming from there. "Stay up here," said a voice, the voice of a woman, an old woman, and my brother squeezed my hand tightly. We stayed still in fear, but the dog had stopped barking. And then that unmistakable scent reached us, a smell of flowers, of plants, of freshly watered earth, the smell of Grandma's garden. First started to go downstairs with his phone, but stopped halfway. "Something stinks down there," he said when he came back. We went into my mom's room, and the three of us locked ourselves in there with the dog. We closed the door. There was still more than an hour left until sunrise. If we could hold out in there, we would be safe. In the forest, my mom and the priest were surprised by that gunshot in the distance and kept walking, heading toward where they had heard it. Some voices seemed to come from among the trees, and then they could see the light of several lamps through the branches. They had to choose between announcing themselves from a distance and risking harm, or hiding until they could leave. They didn't have much time, so they had to choose the first option. The father shouted and waved his lamp from afar. 3 ranchers approached them, shouting if they didn't know it was private property. But when they saw that it was a priest and a lady, they changed their tone of voice. "What are you doing here? It's dangerous." "We're looking for something we lost around here," said my mom. "On a walk," the father interrupted her. "We left something on a walk that has sentimental value during a hike. We lost it somewhere around here, and we're looking for it." Of course, it wasn't believable that they were looking for something in the dark at dawn. But the ranchers decided to trust them, or at least pretend they did. "Can we help you?" Yes, it was near a huge fallen tree burned by lightning. The father looked at my mom. By saying it out loud, he knew they had less time. The ranchers told them it was just a little further and they were almost there. They kept walking, and the father asked one of them, the youngest one, what they had shot at, if they were hunting. "We're scaring off the witches, Father. They come every day." The father tried to walk a little slower so he could delve deeper into the subject without the others noticing. "How so, son? Are witches common here? Or have you only started seeing them lately?" "You shouldn't believe in those things, right, Father?" An older man interrupted, making the priest fall silent. He knew at that moment that he wouldn't be able to find out anything more about it. My mom asked the priest to hurry up because she was worried about my godmother. The ranchers asked him if anyone else was with them, and he answered yes, that there was an older lady who had stayed in the car on the highway. When they heard this, without saying anything, they quickly went in that direction. But before that, that man told them that what they were looking for was a few steps ahead and that they would wait for them on the highway. The young man grabbed his father's shoulder and said, "Always, Father, but lately it's been worse." They went a little further. "It's here, right?" said the father. My mom turned around and followed Father's light as he shined it on the tree she nearly passed. "Yes, this way, Father, help me." My mom was confused because 2 branches looked familiar, like the one she saw as a sign. Each began digging beneath one of them. It wouldn't be hard, the ground was moist. My mom soon felt something. She felt it like the crucifix. She pulled it forcefully out of the ground and was horrified when she realized what it was. It was a doll's leg, and she knew very well which doll it was. My father turned around, worried by my mother's scream, and shined the light toward her. A bell was sticking out of the ground. We heard a noise below, and the dog barked. We opened the door, but those words still lingered in the room, almost floating. Stay up here. I'm not sure if I kept hearing it, but we all felt it. I can't explain it. But we heard the door to the downstairs room open. That door, unlike all the others in the house, luckily for us and because of the way it was built inside, opened outward. My brother left our room and took a few steps toward the stairs. He saw something strange. It only made sense when my mother explained what was happening in the forest then. My brother says he saw a person, or something the size of a person, come out of that room. He was dressed like his little Harlequin and was hopping on one foot and went to the door. My brother saw only the silhouette, but that hat was unmistakable. We could all hear the sound of him leaving the house. The father found the crucifix, and something was heard again among the branches. A bit ahead, as if several people were coming. But something came quickly from behind. It was one of the ranchers, the young one, who asked them to hurry up. My uncles are already with the lady. Go over there. I'll keep an eye on these ones here. The young boy, no older than 16, stood staring into the darkness with a shotgun that seemed to weigh half his body. In the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit. Amen, said the priest with the crucifix in his hands. My mother says that at that moment she felt as if a curtain had fallen around them, a curtain that kept them in the dark. Suddenly the air was less heavy. Suddenly the cold seemed less overwhelming. Everything is going to be fine, son, the father said to the boy, and he walked with my mother toward the road. You need to leave home and be away for a few days. Let me stay there in the meantime. I need to make sure you'll be safe afterwards. I need to know what you have there. That you can live in relative peace from now on, the priest told my mom as they walked. Relatively? She asked. It's not easy, ma'am. I'm sorry to say it. This doesn't get completely cleaned away. If I do it right, they should stop bothering you, but if I'm being honest with you, most likely a lot of what came will stay there with you, even if you can't notice it. They reached the car where my godmother waited with the ranchers, who, seeing them from afar, began walking down the road ahead. My godmother was anxious, talking about some women who were nearby, looking at the car, watching from the grass, but who left as soon as they heard those kind gentlemen approaching. The father smiled when she described them as kind. They hadn't seemed that way to him. When they got home, it was already dawn. I felt, at least, like I had gone days without sleep. The father took a box he was carrying and placed the crucifix inside. I didn't want to look at it. We all slept in the living room for a few hours, until my godmother and the father woke us up with breakfast preparations. My brother and Fur returned the dog. We're going to leave for a few weeks, my mom explained. And even though my godmother offered her house, we decided it should be farther away, outside the city. But before we left, that day while we were packing our suitcases, the priest and my mom went to a convent on the other side of the city. My mom says, although she hasn't told us everything, that they spoke with the Mother Superior. The priest explained the situation. He told her that they needed to leave something there that belonged to my mom. to my family, and that it was likely that at some point they would have to come back for it, or that someone else might come to need it, to require it. I have to warn you that it's hard to have it, Mother. Do you understand me? We'll be fine here, he replied, and we'll be waiting to give it back. At least that's what the mother said, because since then, we haven't gone to get him, and we have no plans to do so. We don't know. We have no idea if he caused something in that place. What we do know, unfortunately, is that although we lived peacefully for a while after all the father's work at home, eventually, certain presences returned. We also know about what happened at my brother's ex-girlfriend's house, about what happened that made them not even answer his calls anymore. We know about what happened at Fur's house, about the visits the father has had there at the village church. We know about that thing that seemed to have awakened and clung to my godmother's house, and that to this day is still there. Something whose name I cannot pronounce. We are still dealing years later with that echo, with the echo of the spells of Father Lucas's crucifix. To close this story, the compilation we've made of these episodes that kept your interest and curiosity during the past month, we're going to tell 2 short stories that accompanied the main one. Next, we present to you the experiences in the priest's church and in the house of the protagonist's brother's ex-girlfriend. We were left waiting for the one that happened at Fur's house, the friend, and about that being with a goat's head, but with human features. We have been strongly asked not to share anything. They tell us, according to the person who shared this story with us, that it's a very strong presence, and they prefer that it doesn't get out of control, especially since in the last year the appearances have become more and more sporadic. In other words, why mess with it? If this lady has been calm lately, it's better to leave it that way. The names of the main characters in these stories, yes, have been shared with us, but we're going to leave them out. This is the Epilogue of the Crucifix by Father Lucas. What happened to poor Father Lucas was very strange, even years after he came to help us. As far as we know, even recently, he is still dealing with the consequences. And as you may have noticed from the experience, Father Lucas didn't really get the worst of what we went through. And those days before returning to Guanajuato, he even took the time to run some errands here and waited for an acquaintance from the town who already had a planned trip to go back with him. That's what he did. But it was as if only then, days later, all the exhaustion, all the stress, and all the fear that must have built up in him over those days suddenly hit him. When they hit the road, night fell very quickly and the father fell asleep. He said that in his sleep he could hear screams of women flying over the trees following the car, as if writhing in pain. He woke up having a panic attack and they had to pull over so he could get out and throw up. And he vomited something very black, something like tar, and the man who was driving him got scared. This isn't normal. Father, he said to him, let me take you to a doctor. But the father knew very well that he was starting to pay the price for that encounter he had. He wasn't going to get rid of whatever was following the crucifix so easily for some reason. Days later, back in town, he happened to talk at the store with someone from that neighboring village where he had gone with my grandmother years before. And over there, both of them were a kind of legend, even though all the priests who came afterward were bothered by it, and all of them questioned the work they did in that sort of exorcism. Do you already know what happened over there in the village, Father? The public transport driver asked him in a mocking tone. that the witches had their party in the old cemetery and they disturbed graves and dug up bones. You know they all died long ago. The priest knew that the old little house where it all happened had been abandoned for years. That whole hill was deserted and no one went up to that cemetery anymore. The dead who remained there had run out of living visitors. "Which witches?" he asked. "I thought you didn't believe in those things anymore." "No, Father, we stopped believing." But one night, screams were suddenly heard from above and lights appeared in the sky, as if they had huge bonfires that bounced off the clouds. And then a bunch of women from the village came out of their houses naked and ran up there, and they never came back down. We still had a lot of witches among us without knowing it. Even my cousin Lupita, Father, went up there. She looked so saintly and so Catholic. The priest later confirmed with the authorities that indeed disappearances had been reported, but they were still being investigated. But something had happened, something serious. It's a shame I no longer had the means to go investigate. It would be someone else's problem, maybe the priest of that town, who didn't believe in that and saw the witches' beliefs as primitive local traditions. And he let it go. And at times he even managed to forget about everything. Until weeks later, the banging of a door in the wind woke him up in the early morning. When he got up to check, he realized it was open, that the lock he had on the inside had opened without being forced, as if someone from inside the house behind the church had done it, even though he was the only one there. He closed it, thinking that maybe he hadn't locked it that night, but as soon as he got into bed, he heard it again. The door was open. He went back to it and looked outside into the darkness. On that black night, trying to see them, trying to see her. He knew she was there. He could feel her. Somewhere, that white-haired woman was watching him, even though outside there was that absolute darkness. He shut the door, blocked it with a chair, and tried to sleep. However, this started to happen several times a week. At some point, it became rare for a night to go by without someone opening the door or the window of his room or his office, where he would find papers scattered everywhere as if a tornado had come through. Until one of those nights when he got up again because of those noises that had almost become routine, he was also able to hear voices. Voices coming from the other end of that church hallway. He got closer, and indeed they were voices praying the rosary. When he opened the door to see what was happening, the voices had already gone silent. Everything inside was in semi-darkness. He lit a candle he had nearby since the light switch was at the other end, and what he saw still affects him. Inside the church, sitting on the benches, there were at least about 10 women covered up to their heads. They had fallen silent when he opened the door, but they all seemed to be looking at him. He thought about praying. But these women were already doing it, maybe as a mockery, maybe as a sign that he had no power in doing it himself. So he just closed the door and went to his room to pray. And these apparitions became constant every night. And they prayed out loud. They prayed outside his bedroom door, making him see that his prayers were useless, that he had to go get the crucifix, that it was the only way to drive them away from there. And it was then, when this idea kept repeating in his head, that he realized. Then he knew that was what they were looking for. The apparitions continued, although not every night, but the father has managed to appease them and convince himself that they can't hurt him. At least, that's what he believes so far. As I already told you, this experience also ended my brother's relationship, which had lasted a long time. Both had already grown very close to their partners' families in a wonderful way. We, for example, still miss my brother's girlfriend, and we're very happy when she calls us, say hello, and see how we're doing. But on that occasion, my brother brought something that manifested itself in that house, and the family didn't let him even enter it again. The girl can't come here either. That afternoon, no one had any idea what my brother had heard or why he left that place in that way. The only one who had some information was his girlfriend, but she hadn't believed him. She had even made fun of him a little for believing it and for being so worried about it. They were waiting to have dinner in that house. The girlfriend's little brother was with a neighbor. His room was empty, and that's why the mother was surprised. When she walked past it, she clearly heard someone walking inside, as if in circles, incessantly. For a moment, she decided to ignore it, maybe wisely. But when she walked back to the living room to prepare dinner, she couldn't ignore it anymore. She heard it, walked up to the door, and fell silent. And she was about to open it when those noises inside stopped. She tried to forget, but that night held another surprise for her. A terrible headache wouldn't let her sleep, and after a lot of effort, when exhaustion finally took over, she managed to sleep, but only to have nightmares. When she told her daughter about the dream she had in the morning, that's when everything connected with what we were experiencing at home. In her dream, the lady saw her son sleeping and watched from the doorway. But behind him, sitting on the bed, as if he had also been lying down just moments before, there was a figure, a man, dressed like a Harlequin. He was watching her. He stared at her intently, and he signaled her with his finger to be quiet. At that moment, the poor lady woke up. It was almost dawn, and she went to check. Everything was fine, but the room was terribly cold, and the poor boy shivered and talked in his sleep. His mom woke him up to tell him that something was wrong, that he should go to his sister's room, where there was an extra bunk bed. And when he went back to his room, he could see his 3 cats standing in the middle of the yard through the glass door. He approached the door and invited them in, but the animals ignored him. They were staring intently upward at the roof. Through the reflection in the car window next to the cats, he says he could see a figure sitting on it, on that roof. A figure that looked too much like what she had just seen in her dreams. He tried to ignore it all, blaming everything on his dream, tiredness, and headache. But something else was about to happen, something that would change her life forever. Especially that of his youngest daughter, who at that time was only 7 years old. This occurred just 2 days later. At night, the girl took a bath to get ready for bed, when she heard someone enter the bathroom. Without opening her eyes because she was washing her hair, she asked them to leave. She was grown and embarrassed to be seen naked. But this figure that had entered stood right behind the curtain. He was too tall to be her brother or her dad, and even though the figure was blurry, the little girl noticed that he was missing a leg. She screamed when it lunged at her and pulled the curtain, but her dad was nearby and came to see what was happening. The little girl wouldn't stop screaming. She kept screaming that something had attacked her, that something had scratched her. Her dad heard footsteps leaving down the hallway. He ran out and saw him go into his son's room, and when he went in after him, he saw a figure, now the size of a doll, hiding under the bed. The rest of the family had already come because of the poor girl's screams, and together they lifted the bed and searched every corner without finding anything at all, except for a hole in the wall, just big enough for a mouse to hide in. When the girlfriend, afraid, called my brother to tell him, my brother asked her if the thing they saw was missing a leg, and she answered yes. Her mother overheard, grabbed the phone, and told him never to come near her daughter or their house again. She didn't even let my brother tell her that he could help her, that he knew how. And that girl, now grown up, still hasn't fully regained her speech. She stutters a little, and the family still blames my brother for this incident. We know this isn't their last apparition. We believe that entity left our house and hid over there, but they haven't confided anything else to us. If this family ever, for any reason, comes across this story, we just want to apologize for what you had to go through, for what you're probably still suffering, and hopefully someday you'll let us help. If we ever at any point have more information about any of the stories, believe us, you and your community will be the first to know.